My lesson that I planned for a Year 6 class was a 90-minute activity that explored the use of conductive and non-conductive Play-Doh to create electrical circuits. The lesson required the students to work in groups and make their own Play-Doh and then use the two types of Play-Doh they made to create 3 different types of circuits: a simple circuit, a short circuit, and figure out a way to prevent a short circuit using these Play-Dohs. Students were not only required to make these circuits, but then also explain the science behind how they worked using a worksheet provided to them. I believe that one of the greatest strengths of this lesson was the hands-on approach that it focused on, allowing the students to learn about a familiar topic in a new and creative manner. The group work aspect of this activity was another way to advance student learning by having them collaborate with one another. However, the groups needed to be monitored in order to ensure that each student was contributing equally to guarantee that every child was having an equally as rich learning experience. The worksheets that were given to each student were a constructive way to monitor student learning and ensure that they were able to remain on task. It was also a useful way to assess the students' learning at the conclusion of the lesson and determine areas that still required improvement. Shown here are 2 worksheets, one completed by a student with a very thorough understanding of the content, and another completed by a student who did not have as firm of a grasp on the content, but would have gained assistance from other members in their group. Without having the worksheets, it would have been much more challenging to assess the students' retention based purely on their construction of the circuits. These worksheets showed that the students were able to create the circuits perfectly, although not each student showed the ability to explain the science behind how they worked. If given the opportunity to do this lesson again, I would have made sure to explain to the students how the Play-Doh is able to conduct electricity to ensure that each student entered the task with a wealth of knowledge. This was an extremely strong lesson in that the students were able to learn so much, not only from the activity, but from one another. I was able to witness students teaching one another not only how to construct the circuit, but also how the circuit was able to work using the Play-Doh as a conductor. Other than teaching them how to make the Play-Doh and then instructing them on which circuits to make, I had very little part in what they were learning from one another, which was an extremely unique learning environment that I'm glad I had the privilege to witness. One aspect of the lesson that could have been changed was the manner in which instructions on how to make the Play-Doh were given. When teaching the lesson, I stood at the front of the class going through a list of instructions that were written on a PowerPoint being displayed on the board. Students were then able to follow along with the instructions that were being explained to them while the teacher rotated throughout the class, ensuring that they all remained on task. While this was fairly comprehensive and all the students were able to follow along, upon reflection, I believe a more productive way to teach this would have been to have written instructions printed with pictures and given these to the students for them to each follow along at their own pace while the teacher rotates around the classroom providing support wherever needed. If given the opportunity to do this lesson again, I would have also extended the time of the lesson to allow for the opportunity to have the students create an object that they would be able to keep and take away from the lesson other than the Play-Doh as a reminder of what they had learned through this activity. I would also have chosen different students to participate in the group discussion at the conclusion of the lesson, as the ones I had selected already had a firm grasp of the content, and it would have been a more beneficial use of time to have students without as deep of an understanding explore the content and theory from the lesson. I had the privilege of visiting a private school that featured a wealth of resources that were made available to me for this lesson. The Year 6 Science Room featured all of the electrical resources, including batteries, electric wires, and LED lights. The school also paid for me to purchase each of the ingredients required to make the Play-Doh. I'm aware that having these resources made so easily available to me is a privilege, and I am extremely grateful for the opportunity I was given. The school, specifically my supervising teacher, was extremely helpful in facilitating my teaching of this lesson. The only hurdle I faced was the difficulty I had fitting this long lesson into the class's already busy schedule. The school had an extremely well-equipped science room that the students were all able to have access to with teacher supervision. The science classroom allowed for students to partake in a variety of science experiments that are able to advance their learning. In conclusion, I believe that the use of practical and interactive science activities in the classroom is extremely beneficial to student learning. It gave the students an opportunity to work on an equal playing field and use their knowledge of the content to interpret the data and make critical observations regarding the work they are doing. They were able to engage an active part of their brain and form a deeper and more lasting understanding of the topic of electrical circuits by learning about them in a new and interactive manner.